Hello, hello.
Yeah, you gonna hear it.
Good afternoon. I'm Professor Vanetta Davis Felix. We'd like to welcome you to the Oviedo campus of our 4th week of Black Minds Matter session. Today I'm going to have our panel introduce themselves, starting with our students on my right.
My name is Brooke Gaynor. Hi.
I'm Malik Silva.
Dimitri Abraham.
Hi, I'm Debbie Saki, biology professor.
Barbara LaBranch, Director of the Faculty Center.
I'm Gerald Jones, Director of Student Life.
I'm Jeff Gibbs, Campus Dean.
I'm Janet Valanoff, the AVP for Equity and Diversity and the Title IX Coordinator for the college.
Thank you. We'd like to welcome and thank our panel and welcome our Sanford and our Altamont campus who are viewing. And again, welcome to the Oviedo campus from myself and our Dean, Jeff Gibbs. Over the past few weeks, we have been discussing topics in relating to Black Minds Matter. This week's topics I find very interesting and really the meat of our session as we begin to bring awareness to this particular topic. This week's topic, our Foundations of Black Males Research and Practice. And Dr. Luke opens up with this session talking about love and education. And I found that very interesting this week as that relate to love outside of education and love pertaining to education in our school system. And he mentioned 10 things that we could do for our students as well as in our homes with our children. And I think this is something as educators that we all could do that relate to love and education. And I think they're worth mentioning. And I'm going to mention those, and then we're going to go into our challenge that Dr. Luke mentioned, and our students here from our African American Culture Forum, in which I'm the advisor here on the Oviedo campus, would like to answer that challenge with us today. So those particular attributes that he mentioned that were particularly relating to our Black and brown students, he said one is act excited when the students arrive. Number 2 was learn about them and their interests. Number 3, want the best for your students. 4, discipline them with love. 5, boast about them. When they do something extraordinary or great, boast about them. Investing time in our students. Shared investment. Guard them from others. Advocate for our students. And the last one, he said, worry about them, because there's issues and things that our students deal with that are very important that contribute to their success in the education system. So I thought those were worth mentioning, being educators, especially pertaining to our Black and brown students. One of the challenges that Dr. Luke mentioned for affirming Black Minds Matter was Black Minds Matter because. And I would like for our students representing the African American Culture Forum here on the Oviedo campus to answer this question, starting out with Black Minds Matter because, and we're going to start with our president, Dimitri Abrams.
Black Lives Matter, Black Minds Matter because we are a part of society that has not always been highlighted the way it's supposed to, and all of our intellectual achievements have furthered our society as a whole, and all of the minds that can help push us further matter to help us at all. There you go.
Black Minds Matters because our minds are unique. We are different from many other people, and we have done many things that we have achieved many things that have been belittled and shunned out, and we're speaking up now to show that our minds matter and that we have accomplished great things and we could do even more.
Black Minds Matter because we are, like Dimitri said, equally a part of this community just like anyone else is, and we've been through things that make our mind more stronger, that I feel we can have an impact on others that they don't know.
Thank you. This week's video focused on 2 particular interviews that related to the background or some of the research that has been conducted by 2 predominant professors, Dr. Harper and Dr. Harris. And they focused on anti-deficit achievement framework and looking at the hegemonic masculinity factors relating to our African American men. And this is what we want to focus on today. So we're going to address those questions in relation to these issues. And so before we get into the questions, we're going to ask our panel if they want to talk about these issues in relation to the anti-deficit achievement and looking at the hegemonic masculinity issues relating to our Black and brown males.
Hello, thank you. Once again, I'm Gerald Jones. For those of you who have questions that you would like to send to Oviedo to us today, please email me at jonesg. For those of you who are streaming via Sanford Lake Mary and Altamont Springs, you can send those questions to me, jonesg at seminolestate.edu. The question that I would like to engage you all today in is question number one is, why is having an anti-deficit perspective important for educators of Black boys and men, as well as how does this perspective differ from common perspectives of these students, their families, and their communities? I got very excited about this week's course because things began to shift from previous topics that we've been reviewing for our Black Minds Matter coursework. And I was very excited when Dr. Sean Hopper was one of the key facilitators for this week's course, because he began to talk about his framework on anti-deficit achievement. And one of the things that he wanted or encouraged us to do, if you follow Dr. Hopper, and I had the chance to follow him as I was writing my dissertation, I really enjoyed his work because he encourages us to focus on the academic successes of Black males and not through the lens of failure. When you look at the research that is collected in higher education, 98% of the research talks about the retention deficit. Black boys and Black men are dropping out. They're not graduating. And it's a lot of it has to do with generalization. But Dr. Hopper is one of those researchers that represents the 2% of those who have studied this particular population, and he discovered what has worked. And he has encouraged scholars, colleges, those who are interested in this particular work, is to find out why we have some who has graduated, what has made them very successful, and what could we learn. In other words, he was giving us a counter narrative to what we have always known about this population, and yet Black males are still behind. Well, we know that that is true, but what Dr. Hopper was suggesting in his commentary to this course is that what is it that we could learn from those who have finished college and have graduated? And he began to, and if you haven't looked at his work on the anti-deficit achievement framework, he did some work where he interviewed Black males at various colleges across the United States. And he didn't really go into the why these guys were successful. That was sort of a rhetorical question, but he did encourage us to maybe look at retention through new lenses. And for those of us who have studied this work, we know that retention, whether it was through Tinto's social integration and attrition model, or whether it was all of these scholars, a lot of the earlier research on retention was studied through the lens of white students. And so Dr. Hopper, along with Hagedorn and some other scholars who have studied this particular population, is now giving many a new insight from the lenses of black males and black boys in terms of what contributes to their ability to be successful. And that's part of what it means from the first question of us now changing the narrative, the counter-narrative on the deficit, while we know that it exists, but how could we highlight those black boys and black men, black students for the purpose of our population who are achieving academic success? What are those programs that institutions are contributing or leading that's contributing to that particular academic success? Now, the second part of his question I want to get into real quickly deals with how does this perspective differ from common perspectives of these students, their families, and their communities. And he went into the segment of the whole what it means to act white. And many times it is research that it is perceived that from a black male or black person who is achieving academic success, many times we get that comment that, oh, he's just acting white, or she is just acting white. It's not so much that they are thinking they are better than the next person. It's how it is perceived from someone in your own community that you are now treating them less of because you are now in an institution of higher learning. And we're going to get into that perhaps more when we talk about the hegemonic masculinities that our other scholar had the opportunity to really get into in the videos. And so in conclusion, there is a growing body of literature who is beginning to look at the academic success of black males. And I really want people to get it and to understand is that we've talked about retention for a long time. This is why we're here. However, and there isn't however, not a but a however, or maybe I should say and, there is also black males and black students who are doing well academically in our institutions of higher learning. And so the question becomes, what is it that we could learn from that particular population? What is it that they have that allowed them to jump over those hurdles of financial problems or those hurdles of juggling life outside of academics? What is it that they have that we may learn from or shed light to that will help bridge the gap between those black male students who are not graduating and their contemporaries?
Thank you, Dr. Jones, for that very elaborate and informative response to question 1. Question 2 says, what personal and cultural assets do black boys and men have that enable them to succeed in education? The second part says, how can educators and institutions leverage these assets to support them in navigating systems that were not designed for them or their successes? And this is interesting, being a mother of 3 boys. What personal and cultural assets do our boys have? First of all, they have a strong family support system. Whether they're in a single family home or with 2 parents, I think our African American men do have a strong family support system, where in most African American homes, education is key. And I know last week we talked about stereotypes, and they said that education doesn't matter and black people don't care about education. I find that to be the #1 bad report. Education is very important. And the assets that they have, our young men are very talented, they're creative, they're smart, they can juggle any task that you give them with the right support and means. and talking to some of our students. And one thing that we do, and I'm going to go ahead and mention this, for these past couple of weeks, one of the things that we do a part of the African American Cultural Forum is we meet and we watch these videos together as a group. And most of the time we meet at my home and we discuss these issues, and I write these down as the young men talk about their challenges and their issues. And some of the things that we talked about last week about not being not getting help, not seeking help, not being strong in the classroom. These are things that they are, and these are assets that they have. They are very intelligent and bright young men. And I think what we can do as an institution is to recognize that and to use those assets, use those things that they do have, and build upon whatever they may be lacking in. If they need extra resources, they need extra help. But to pay attention to those resources and build upon those things. And I think that's what we can do as educators and as institution to help build the support and for them to navigate the system that was not built for them. And maybe we can also change the system so that it can include everyone. And I think that gets more into the equity issue. And I'm going to let Dr. Balanoff go ahead and answer question number 3, which deals with that. And her question says, what does it mean to be equity minded? And what does that look like in terms of policy research and practice?
The main lesson I learned from this week's webinar was to think in terms of equity-minded as a basic set of fairness goals, and those fairness goals deal with taking the student where he or she is and moving them forward to graduation, whatever it takes. If you are an educator, you are here to educate. It's not up to you to work at an institution that is open access and say, this student's not ready for my class, I give up. I wash my hands of him. I don't think she can succeed. We're here to take the student from the places they come. And if they start in advanced calculus, to move them forward into whatever's next for them, or if they start in intermediate algebra, then you take them from there and move them forward. Because equity does not mean equality. It does not mean that each student starts from the same place. So I would say in terms of fairness, it's part of our philosophy to take the students from where they are and move them forward to graduation. What this looks like in terms of research, I go back to Dr. Jones's answer in question 1, and what I found a weakness in this week's webinar was the lack of focus on the historically black colleges and universities. I think that those can be our models for success in a number of ways. If they are private schools, obviously they have an endowment, they may have more scholarship money than we do, but we're not talking about all poor students, and therefore scholarships are not the answer. The difference between those universities and us is not necessarily telling. What I found in looking at HBCUs over the years is a pattern of success, an expectation of success. And so I would add that to my question 3 definition of equity, in that you start from an expectation of success and you move the student along from there. The putting into practice, the end of this question 3, looks like, to me, tenure status reviews that credit the faculty member with research on this population, that doesn't denigrate it as too specific to count as research. It looks like research that goes toward success and not identifying the reasons for failure. We know when people drop out that there are certain reasons. I'm not trying to get away from that. But to focus on the techniques for success, I think we could be looking at the historically black colleges and universities who graduate lots and lots of people every year, and we have not studied those yet for the techniques that we might import.
Thank you. Our next question, question 4, will be answered by Professor Lott. How do we hold institutions and educators accountable for having an anti-deficit perspective and being equity-minded?
Thank you. So to answer this question, I would have to speak to the second part, actually, of question number 3, policy, research, and practice. And so when we talk about holding institutions and educators responsible, we have to look at what are the policies of that institution. Do those policies support the education of black males? And we know this discussion isn't truly just about black males, because a rising tide lifts all boats. So if we have policies that support student education at every level, as Janet mentioned, and meeting students where they are, then that's a starting point. And if those policies are in place, then the research that goes into demonstrating whether the institution is upholding those policies is important. And so we have to turn to our institutional research office to find out, are we doing research that demonstrates we're maintaining and upholding the policies that are in place? Do we have research that shows whether or not these policies need to be tweaked or adjusted to better support our students? And Janet mentioned tenure status review. And so when we talk about faculty and staff who are employed by the institution, there are ways to determine whether those individuals are also upholding these policies or demonstrating the types of characteristics and providing the opportunities for students that support their education at every level. So I have to go to the policy, the research, and the practice. Ultimately, I'm all for taking what does it take to help these students be successful versus why are these students failing? Now, to be fair, you have to understand one in order to develop a policy or a thought process about the other. But when it comes to practice, do our practices follow what's been established in policy? Do they follow what we say are important features for our faculty and staff and important characteristics for them to demonstrate? Do we have student perception of instructions that validate that, yes, this particular professor is one who promotes equity in the classroom, is one who brings forth a diverse resource so that every student feels that they can see a part of themselves in that particular discipline. And I go back to, I believe it was video 1, where the speaker gave the example for a chemistry class and how students didn't know who Dr. Woodson was, or some of our most famous African-American scientists. So when we talk about helping students to succeed and what is it that institutions and educators can do, it comes back to policy, research, and practice. I'm going to say one more thing. Last week or the week prior, we talked about examining biases, and I think that's important. As educators, it's important for us to examine our biases. We all have them. So there's no question as to whether we have them or not. The question is whether or not our biases are preventing us from providing the best education possible for all students.
Thank you, Professor Lott. Our next question, and we're going to ask, this will be an open question. How can masculinities be leveraged as assets to support the success of black boys and men? What are some of the potential ways that hegemonic masculinities can inhibit success of this population? Open question.
The assets that were mentioned earlier of family support and structure making the intelligence shine, I think would be key here. That family structure also comes from your campus. When you feel involved, you feel that the college itself is your second family, and that can be an encouraging factor for students. So I would name that as one of the factors to be leveraged as assets. I would like us as a college to get to the point where all students think that it's cool to be smart, that there is no peer pressure to look cool by not being smart or by not participating in class or by not having your work done or by not having a research focus, whatever your particular discipline might be, where it's cool to go to the academic support center because that's what smart people do. When they have a problem, they go find a solution, and the academic support center might be just that solution for that particular class. And so that guidance toward using your family structure to create a second home is something that I find would be very strong for our college if we could make that a part of our culture.
Thank you. One of the issues that was addressed in the video was talking about how they talked about the cool pose, and I want to address to some of our students that they have to show swagger, that they have to be cool. They don't ask questions, not wearing pink or not doing certain things because they're feminine. There are things that are related to feminism. How do you feel about that, about having swagger? Do you feel like you have to be cool? Do you feel like you can't go to the Academic Success Center? Do you feel like you can't take on certain leadership roles? I found that very surprising when they talked about that students felt that way. So I want to hear the perspective for some of our black males in here, how they feel about that situation.
Okay, so I would like to take it back to number 5, where how could some of these hegemonic masculinities inhibit the success? I would say that masculinity as a whole would need to be, the whole framework or perception of it should change within our community, because we come from a people that where most black men are doing more physical work with their hands, and not to take away from the work that they're doing, but the advantages or the ability to take on work in education or more intellectual careers hasn't always been available. And now that we're moving towards a society where equality is being more pushed and we are now getting these opportunities, how we perceive masculinity within our communities should change to where strength isn't just a physical term, and it ties into the brain and thinking and making wise decisions and just pursuing careers that way too.
To kind of piggyback on what he said, masculinity does need to change. Is more than just physical attributes that we have that we can show and make use of. As she was saying, is that kids were saying it's not cool to go to the Academic Success Center and stuff like that. That has been a mindset of just straight masculinity, not wanting to learn and educate themselves. Also, from, as Dimitri was saying, I'm just going to pass it.
Okay.
You already said
Waiting our young men, we have some more of our guys out in the audience, Marquise and Javette. Would you all like to answer that question in relating to that? You can come up here. You can stand there, Javette. Javette, stand up here.
Oh, stand here. Oh, cool.
That's good.
In terms of what was the question? How we can
In terms of masculinity, and what has been your experience? Do you feel, being a male, that you feel like you can't go to the Academic Success Center because it makes you feel like less than a man? You feel like you can't ask questions in class. You can't go to your instructor's office hours. All these stigmatisms that are related to being masculine, being a leader. I know, being a part of this organization, there were several years where we had a lot of females as president and vice president, and I had to go to the young men and say, hey, this organization need you to lead. And they was like, oh, that's something girls do. But to get them into that role that, hey, you're a man, you can lead, even though not saying that girls can't lead, but how do you feel about those things in terms of masculinity?
Well, I always felt that I always thought that, you know, your looks or your strength can get you like so far, but your mind is what would take you the farthest. And I feel like if teachers would encourage that more, maybe. Well, teachers do encourage it, but like in terms of black men, you see most black men, like, they're working jobs that you really don't need to go to college for, or you work jobs that, you know, you just get by to pay your paycheck. But in terms of jobs to, like, you know, use your mind, use your talent that like breaks through in your creativity. You don't really see that. I remember one time, I think it was my first month or like the last month in our fall semester when I first joined at ACF. You asked us for Professor Felix. You asked us we need all black males who has a 3.0 to write it, to like tell us so we can like give awards. And I didn't at the time have a 3.0, but I was like, that's really cool how you get awards for having that for having a higher GPA. So it encouraged me to have a higher GPA. But I never thought that going to the academic success center and getting smarter, or doing all the extra things, or being a leader, or actually participating, because I love to participate, I love to get involved, but actually participate, I never thought that was not cool. I thought it was uncool that you'd go to school, or you'd be involved in things, but you actually wouldn't be involved. You just be there just to be there, you know.
Thank you. Marquise, you have anything you'd like to add?
All right, so to piggyback on what Javek said, I can definitely agree with him. Growing up in high school, I went through that kind of experience on my behalf because I was the student that was outside, that the leader, the class president, and being judged for that. So being on the other side of the hand of being a leader, and the opposite of not trying to be the cool person around, it was very judgmental. And growing up as, oh, he's trying to be white, or he's trying to do this because of, you know, other people. But what I can say from being on the other side is just stay focused and don't let that bother you, and don't worry about being cool, because, you know, being cool is that education and a higher degree is what would get you farther. So that's what I would do.
Thank you. I think it's great to hear from our students' perspective, because this is who we're serving, and at the end, they're the end result of the people that we're serving, and we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our students. Would anyone else like have any comments? Gerald, did you have any comments about that question? I thought you was.
Well, I think the students did a lot of great explanation to what Dr. Harris was shared with us in the video, and Janet kind of summed it up in terms of what Dr. Harris mentioned, 3 things that influence academic success for black men, and he labeled it as help seeking, encouraging them to go out to financial aid, go to, as it was mentioned earlier, the Academic Success Center, stay and ask questions amongst your faculty members. That's part of the research that suggests when students are engaged, not just inside the classroom, but outside the classroom as well, they actually graduate. That is a proven formula that works. And if we really want to know what drives others, and particularly students of color, black males, there is a correlation perhaps between those who are engaged outside of the classroom and graduation rates. Another thing that he mentioned was seeing school as a gender-neutral space, and I think that our students just did a fine job of really talking about what that means in terms of the cool, being cool. It should cool pose, and it's what does that mean? I don't want to be labeled as feminine, because I am sitting in front of the class, always on time, carrying books, and I am studying and not having or portraying in how we define what masculinity means. And Dr. Harris did a great job in giving us research behind that, and he referenced Jim O'Neill, who talked about male gender role conflict in a study he did, and it says when men recognize they can't live up to the expectations of gender masculinity, they come across as I must be tough or aggressive or hunk, and if I'm not, then you know, I am not masculine. Or and then also can lead to experiencing anxiety and conflict. We don't want people to see us as less of a man, and as a result, many people overcompensate and engage in risky behavior. Binge drinking. Well, men drink. I'm not a man if I can't get beer and just go at it, you know. Or sexual relationships with multiple women. And we see where that leads us for those who engage in that type of behavior. He said this person covers up the fact that he's not living up to the things he was told to do. And so that's the work of Jim O'Neill. And then the last part, and I'm going to pass the mic back over, is that he talked about, Dr. Harris talked about the breadwinner orientation. He mentioned that we need to get students to embrace or to understand school is about getting involved in a diverse setting, and meeting people that perhaps you may not have the opportunity to meet had not you stepped foot into the grounds of academia. And so he encourages us to change the narrative that life is bigger than becoming the breadwinner. And so I may not want to go to college because, or I may not finish because I have to work and survive and provide for my families. But discounting the notion, as Professor Felix mentioned, the leadership opportunities that these students are engaging in, you're not going to get those, not the way that we do leadership, if you do not step on the grounds of our institutions. And so, and those are skills that we provide students that really help them become better leaders. So it was that's just my summary on this whole hegemonic masculinity perspective and how it could inhibit the success of our black males and boys.
Thank you.
I want to piggyback on a couple of things. And first I want to say I was very encouraged by the comment about cross-cultural participation. It does a couple of things for us. Number one, it gets students into social support groups. So, you know, the more our students have an opportunity to interact with each other, and the more they're able to develop friendships here on the campus, you know, going back to what you talked about earlier, Gerald, you know, the more likely they are to succeed. And I'm encouraged by the cross-cultural reference because, you know, that tells me that students can be open to building these networks that change these things. Now, having said that, if you go back to question 2, which talks about how the institution deploys resources, you know, we need to take a more careful look at that because we're great at deploying resources to get students into classes and to move on to the next class. But we've got a long way to go in terms of how we build engagement and social support outside the classroom. And I think it's incumbent on us to do that. And I'm going to make a little mention. We have done some pilot testing of some things like this here at the Lee campus to create environments where students are more likely to develop friendships and where they're more likely to participate because the system, the course delivery system is built around engaging them on activities. So, you know, we're starting to see some early returns on that. I think there's promise for that, especially for students of minorities.
And I just want to add, in addition to the social support groups, when Janet mentioned about HBCUs and what's happening at HBCUs to help black men be successful, one of the things that sticks out in my mind is the fraternities, the fraternal organizations, because those organizations, first of all, they have typically GPA requirements to get in, community service requirements, and students who are in those organizations have to maintain those throughout their tenure or throughout their matriculation at that institution. And they absolutely encourage leadership. Like, it's expected. It's not whether you will or not, it's when you will. And so I do believe that those support structures, and particularly the organizations that students have access to and are able to join, are critical to their engagement and success.
Thank you. And he also talked about in the video about not just giving our students money and say, oh, go join this club or be a part of this organization, but providing them with other resources that would help them be better leaders, be better students in the classroom, not just here's some money. So question 4 asked about what can we do to hold our institutions and our educators accountable. Last week we had our session, Dr. Saki was here, and she mentioned some things just about being aware and how how this made her more aware of this situation that we were having, even here at our school, at our campus, you know, not knowing things that happen and hearing from the students how important that was. And I'm going to allow her to have an opportunity to talk about that.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Felix. Yeah, I was very touched last week when individuals were sharing their experience. I know there are a couple people on the panel mentioned how they were singled out because of the color of their skin, and I think sometimes we don't realize that. Unless you walk in someone's shoes, you don't realize the day-to-day struggles and challenges that you have. And it was really touching to me, and so we were talking, and I said, well, what would be great would be to do video. And this week they mentioned that having the 1-minute segment where people share why do Black Minds Matter, and we were talking, well, maybe people can share a short incident that makes others aware of what it's like to walk in your shoes, to be pulled over, to be bullied. Like, I think some people here don't realize exactly what it's like to do that, all the challenges. And I really enjoyed today hearing, and I think this was in the video as well, the engagement and the involvement, which, Professor Felix, you're trying to do that with your club. And the video said that that was the step towards integration, that you have to engage and involve, and then integration evolves from that. So that makes sense to me, and I think we have a long way to go. I think we can try to engage and involve. The integration is really hard. I mean, Dr. Wood mentioned that in his school, him and his twin brother were like one of 5 blacks in the whole school or in his whole class, and I was just like, wow. So I think it has to start someplace. So it's hard right now, but I think if we can engage and involve, that integration will come and will bring more people to the Oviedo campus, more people to Seminole State College, and say, hey, this is a place as a stepping stone that you can come here, feel welcome, and go really far, right? That's what we're all about. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saki. Would anyone else like to have any other comments? Well, I want to thank you for joining us today, and we're going to ask you to continue these discussions and to continue to have these discussions on your campus. And I would like to say what we're doing here is to bring awareness, and if you're not involved, if you're not taking this serious, it's not going to make a difference. And we want to make a difference in our students' lives, and we want to make a difference in our institution, so that we can be a better institution and better serve our students, and particularly our African American males. So we want to thank you for joining us here today for Black Minds Matter at our Oviedo Lee campus. Thank you.